Okay, cool. I'll just message you on WhatsApp later. Wait, you're gonna message me on what? Hallo, Servus, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Felicia, I'm from Munich, Germany, but I currently live in Cincinnati, Ohio, where I've spent about 2 years in total since 2016. So before I came to America to actually live here during my exchange semester in fall 2016, I had been to the country a few times as a tourist, so I did have an idea of what to expect and what some of the differences would be in my everyday life. Still, there were a few random things that America handles differently than Germany that I didn't see coming at all. Just some standard things where I would have never even thought that anyone in the world would do this differently. Until I moved to the US. So here are 7 everyday differences that surprised me in America. In Germany and a lot of other countries in the world, hardly anyone still uses text messages to communicate with others. The messaging app WhatsApp started blowing up in 2011 and has pretty much replaced text messages since then, at least in Germany. We don't even use the word SMS anymore, which is what we used to call regular text messages in our everyday language. We just say, I'll message you or I'll send you a WhatsApp. And that WhatsApp wasn't really a thing in the US absolutely surprised me when I first got here. A lot of people that I mentioned it to hadn't even heard of the app before. And ever since then, I've been asking myself, why? I mean, you would think that it's just as big in the US as it is worldwide, especially since it's an American company and was bought by Facebook in 2014. WhatsApp has 1.5 billion users in over 180 countries, but the US market is really small compared to the rest of the world. Less than 10% of all Americans use it. In Germany, it's 65%, for example. My best guess is just that the need for a messaging app wasn't and isn't as big here as it is in other parts of the world, because a lot of people in the US use iPhones and therefore can use iMessage, which also works via the internet and is pretty much just a little built-in messaging app with Apple. In fact, according to a statistic from March 2019, 47% of all Americans use an iPhone, so almost half the population, whereas in Germany it's only 21%. So maybe this has to do with the amount of Android users in Germany and in other countries. The result of this is that text messages have pretty much died out in Germany, and only 9 billion text messages have been sent throughout the entire year of 2018 in Germany, whereas in America, 6 billion text messages are sent in one day alone. And this is the reason why when my Samsung broke last year, I decided to get an iPhone instead, even though I'm not the biggest fan of iPhones, but I just knew that it would make my life a lot easier in the US with the whole iMessage situation. But as someone who used to only use WhatsApp for years, I personally think that iMessage doesn't even get close to what WhatsApp offers you. The picture quality is a lot lower than when you send pictures via WhatsApp, the sound quality of voice messages is lower, and it's just not as practical. On WhatsApp, you really have all of your conversations in one place, one-on-one conversations as well as group messages. In the US, a lot of people do have group conversations on iMessage, but this only works if everyone in the group has an iPhone. Since not everybody does, a lot of people here use separate apps when it comes to group messaging, such as GroupMe or just Facebook Messenger. To me, that just seems a little unpractical, especially since there's a way to have it all in one place with better quality too. On WhatsApp, you also have a video and an audio call option included, which is the #1 way for me to communicate with my friends and family in Germany, to be honest. And I'm not being paid by WhatsApp, by the way. This is just one of the things in America that absolutely baffled me. This one is somewhat related to the whole WhatsApp and texting topic. Americans use a lot less emojis than Germans and people from some other countries do. I mean, texting can be tricky no matter what country you're from, but in Germany it's very common to use a lot of smiley faces and emojis while texting, just to set the tone and kind of make clear what kind of connotation your message has. So we often add smiley faces even if it's just an objective message, just to make clear that this is meant in a friendly way. And if you don't do that, it often means that something is wrong or it's just considered not as friendly. In the US, the majority of people that I text with or have texted with doesn't really use emojis or smiley faces. Instead, a lot of old-fashioned abbreviations like LOL or LMAO seem to be a little more common. So when I first got here, it took me a while to get used to this, and also I was often worried that people were annoyed with me because they didn't send smiley faces with their messages. And since Americans are generally really friendly and polite people, I totally would have thought that they would use just as many or maybe even more emojis than we do. But maybe that's even part of the reason for this difference, that Americans don't really need to use smiley faces because they usually mean everything in a friendly way anyways, usually at least, whereas Germans often talk in a more serious way with each other, so maybe we need to make this a little bit more clear that something is meant in a friendly way. And maybe it also has to do with the whole WhatsApp situation, because WhatsApp just has a lot of emojis within the app. I talked about this one a little bit more in depth in my video on money and payments, which I'll link to in the info box. But before I came to the US, I had no clue that checks were still a thing. I had literally never seen a check before in my entire life. Most things work via online banking in Germany, which is really fast and safe. You just log into your online bank account, type in the international bank account number of the account that you want to transfer money to, then you enter the amount, of course, and then you get a so-called TAN number to your previously authorized device via an app or a text message. So yes, this would be one of the rare cases where I would actually get a text message in Germany. Then you enter the TAN number to the online banking process, and that's it. This sometimes takes me less than a minute if I'm sending money to an account that I have pre-saved. In the US, online payment services such as Apple Pay, Venmo, or Facebook Pay are pretty big and they're used a lot, but normal online banking, as in transferring money from bank to bank without a third party in between, seems to be kind of rare. I have been paid through direct deposit in the US, but I never actually made a money transfer like that myself. It just doesn't seem to be a big option here. If you transfer money between family or friends, people here usually use checks, cash, or one of those apps. So it seems like the US is stuck between the future and the 50s, kinda. I mean, you can go to the store and pay with your phone, but then you'll pay your rent with a check or cash in person, which is what I've done for 3 out of 4 places I've lived at in the US. And you can see this in the cityscape too. In Germany, a lot of former bank branches are vacant nowadays because not a lot of people actually need to go to a bank counter anymore. Whereas here in the US, you don't only see a lot of banks, but you even see those check cashing places that looked totally vintage to me when I first saw them. So the payment situation is definitely different in the US, and I didn't really expect that beforehand. I'd personally prefer sending money directly to a bank rather than having a company like PayPal or Facebook involved and have them track all my payments and collect my data. But on the other hand, the whole check situation can be kind of fun too sometimes. I mean, I own my personal checkbook now, and writing a check definitely makes you feel powerful and like a grown-up. This is something that I never really noticed until I moved here. Levels are counted differently in the US than they are in Germany and other countries in Europe and in Asia. In Germany, we have the ground level, Erdgeschoss, and then the first level above ground level is the first floor, and so on. And the first floor is called erster Stock or erstes Obergeschoss, first upper level. So I think that kind of makes sense. Americans, however, don't have to do all that thinking. For them, the ground level is simply the first floor, and then the floor above that is the second floor, and so on. So when an American says that they live on the third floor, it's really just the second floor for us Germans. A little confusing, but once you learn about it, it's really not that hard to switch. It's not really a secret that the US likes to use different scale units for a lot of things. Miles, inches, and feet instead of meters and kilometers, gallons instead of liters, Fahrenheit instead of Celsius, etc. But I think until you actually work or study here, you may not be aware of the fact that the paper format is different as well. Instead of the common A sizes, like the A4 or the A5 size, Americans like to use the letter or the legal format. So to show you this is an A4 sized paper, which we use in Germany, and then this is a letter sized paper that they use in the US. So the letter is a lot shorter than the A4, and it's a tiny bit wider, even though I'm not quite sure if you can see this. And I'm just asking myself, why? I personally haven't found a single advantage of why someone would prefer using this letter-sized paper format over the A system. On the contrary, it has a lot of downsides in my opinion. Every paper size here has different proportions, which can make life a little complicated sometimes. With the A system, you can print out PDFs or graphic designs on whatever format because every size has the same proportions. So at German universities, a lot of students print out their PDFs in a way that they fit 2 pages on one sheet of paper, or you can even fit 4 pages on one sheet of paper. And if you make a design for a poster, for example, you can simply just print out the same design in a smaller flyer format because it all has the same proportions. Not here. If you want to print 2 pages on one sheet of paper, they'll have to be scaled down so that you won't be able to use the full size of the paper. And if you design a poster and you want to print it out in a smaller format, you'll have to manually adjust the proportions first. Also, binders in the US have 3 instead of just 2 of those rings, which first of all doesn't make too much sense to me because the paper is actually shorter and we only use 2 rings for the larger or taller A4 paper in Germany. And then also it makes your life so much more difficult because hole punchers here are enormous. This is a normal hole puncher here in the US. Takes up a lot of space, not very handy, whereas this is a hole puncher in Germany. And a lot of students even have these super handy little binder hole punchers that they just put in their binder and that are really light. So this is something that really surprised me because I would have never guessed that you'd make paper sizes that don't have the same proportions, and to this day it sometimes really annoys me. So please change this, America. This is one that wasn't too much of a surprise for me, but it took me a long time to get used to it. And every time I come back from Germany, it feels weird again to do this. Throwing away bottles and cans. In Germany, we have a deposit system for plastic and glass bottles as well as for drink cans. For every empty bottle or can, you get 8, 15 or 25 cents back when you return them to the store for recycling. So in Germany, I had never thrown an empty bottle or can into the regular trash can. Instead, you would collect them. A lot of people collect them underneath the sink and then return them. So throwing those items into a trash can, even if it's a recycling trash can, took me a lot of effort in the beginning. And it was also weird for me to see people squeeze cans or plastic bottles together before throwing them out. Because if you do that in Germany, the return machine won't be able to read the barcode anymore and you'll lose your money. And even normal glass like pickle or jelly jars don't go into the normal trash in Germany. Instead, we collect the used glass and bring it to particular containers in the neighborhood. And finally, there are a few minor things at the grocery store that are different in the US and in Germany. Milk has different percentages, for example. Who would have guessed? In Germany, you can buy milk with 1.5% of fat or 3.5%. Here in the US, it's 1%, 2%. Then there's whole milk, which has about 3.3%, or there's skim milk, which is fat-free. And of course, it comes in different packaging, the most common being a gallon or a half gallon in a plastic container, such as this. This is a half gallon, and this is 1%, by the way. In Germany, milk goes by the liter and it usually comes in Tetra packs. Then cheese here is often pretty much shrink wrapped, like for example sliced cheese, looks like this, or even mozzarella, like this, which in Germany usually comes in water or some kind of liquid. Eggs come in dozens instead of 10 packs like they do in Germany, and the yolk comes in slightly different colors. In the US it's a little bit more yellow, and in Germany it's more orange, and I've read that farms apparently do this on purpose because of the different consumer preferences, which I'm not sure if that's true. I mean, I personally don't really care what kind of color it has. I mean, unless it has like a really weird, unhealthy looking color, but if it's like normal looking, I'll eat it either way. But anyways, I don't know if that's true. So those were my 7 everyday differences that surprised me in the US. If you've ever lived in a different country, what was it that surprised you? What was it that you didn't expect at all? Leave me a comment, and if you have a question that you want me to answer in a Q&A video, just add the hashtag #AskAGerman. I hope you enjoyed this. Subscribe to my channel if you like what I'm doing, and I hope I'll see you next time. Tschüss!